we go. All right. Hey everybody, how's it going? We are live today on WebDM. I am Jim. I'm your host. We're here today talking about bards, revisiting them, checking them out, seeing what the 5e bard is like. We're here hanging out for the midweek hangout here on WebDM. I just got done recording this week's Patreon podcast, and so my brain is sort of like full of all the different threads and tangents that we went on, sort of brainstorming for our next project, and sort of sharing those thoughts with our patrons. So if you're interested in that kind of content, you want to support the channel, be sure to head on over to our Patreon and check out all of those podcast episodes. We are up to 265, so we have quite the back catalog. You can work your way through and check it out, and see what you like, and maybe there's something in there that'll help you out for this week's game. But my throat's feeling a little raw, so I got my water, I got my rainbow straw. We'll see how it looks on the Zoom here. There we go. Not the Zoom, whatever this is, vMix. I don't even know sometimes. My brain is catching up with my mouth. So it's going to be that kind of stream today, folks. We are talking about bards today. So go ahead and ask those questions in the chat. Be sure to put a big question, type the word question out, or a bunch of question marks, maybe something to let us know that you'd like us to answer this question. And if we don't get to it today in the stream, we collect those questions, and from time to time, go ahead and answer them over on our Patreon in just a big Q&A. So I think we probably have another one of those coming up. We'll see how it is. Maybe a treat for the holidays, something like that. So So I don't. The bard's weird to me. It's one of those classes that feels like it's got all this baggage and legacy from prior editions of Dungeons and Dragons. It feels like every edition of D&D I've played, it's been like, we're redoing the bard. The bard was, done wrong last time around, and we're going to do it right this time. And so, like, I think that 5th edition has really nailed it, really gotten the bard in a good place. But it also has come at the cost of, like, what kind of character is this? Like, what kind of archetype are we going for? And to me, it's the bard kind of sits on this conceptual fence right now that a lot of character classes do, right? I think ranger, barbarian, but bard does, where it's like you could either get really specific with it. This is like a character that uses this very particular type of magic, this words of creation, the song of creation kind of background lore that's hinted at in the bard. And you go that way, and that's a very particular type of character concept, and a much more focused type of class. Or this, like, we kind of do a little bit of everything, and we're casters, we're generalized mages, and that magic comes from just sort of our experience and understanding of how magic works, and a little bit of study, a little bit of natural talent, but that bard is the kind of the champion or battle master for casters. It's like, you have some magic, you do some things, and it's going to be how you flavor it and how you present it that really makes the difference, and it's less like mechanically unique or distinct, because there's a lot of language in the opening of the bard class introduction here in the player's handbook that talks about the magic of your music, or when you perform, when you sing, and whatever. And I found myself constantly asking, like, what is this describing as a class feature? Like, this is the narrative introduction for a list of class features that are going to talk about mechanics you might not know anything about. That it's revving up the new player to understand what the concepts are that are about to be expressed mechanically. And we've got, like, mentions of skalds and troubadours and archaeologists, even, all kinds of concepts, all of them sort of vaguely unified by this musical magic or magical music. And I found myself asking, like, you mean like the magic words that wizards and clerics and druids use? Like, at some point, it really just, the bard is just describing what it's like to be a spellcaster, to learn magic. You've learned some of it out while you're adventuring. You might learn a spell that's because it's carved on a dungeon wall. Or you prayed at a shrine, and the spirit there, the lesser god or goddess there blessed you with the knowledge of a minor spell or something. Once a day you can cast first level spell or use a spell slot to cast it, that kind of thing. And that the bard is just kind of a catch-all adventuring mage. And the wizard and sorcerer and warlock represent more specific types of mages. But the bard is, you want to use some magic, you want to just know some things and do some stuff, be a generic adventurer that isn't like a fighter or, warrior type, then bard's your class. And I think like that's the way to go with bard. And it pains me because I really like the specificity. I like the cultural heritage of the bard. I like where they're coming from. I like that in first edition you had to jump around between a bunch of classes before you could qualify to become a bard. I like the legacy that's left with the character class that has a lot of little things. But it's largely based around like going out into the world and experiencing it and being affected by that and having your experiences impact the things that you can do, the kinds of abilities that you have, and then it creates this sort of loop. I think it's also present in the wizard. The wizard needs spells to fuel their spell book, or at least that was the only way they could get them. And so if you want new magic, if you want to discover, new to you at least, you have to go out there and find it. You have to find old spell books. You have to find, runic, spell tablets, that kind of thing. The lost magic of the prior age. That's what gets the wizard out of the laboratory. And I think having to experience the world and the like is what gets the bard out of the tavern. Needing to go and adventure. So, excuse me. Goodness. So, yeah, to me, the bard's in a good place in 5th edition and is in one of those, like, there's nothing dire needed. And I'm not going to address the expert classes for One D&D because as far as I know, that's a isolated single, they're testing out some concepts and the like. And I'm talking about the bard as it exists, and you will play it at your table with your newly purchased player's handbook bard here. So yeah, but I'll take some questions, see where y'all's thoughts are at, what you're curious about, and it maybe will help inform, what all we get up to in the rest of the show here. So let's see. I'll take a break. Hope y'all are doing well this afternoon. The weather's been nuts where I'm at, like bitter cold one day, and then like I need to turn on the AC the next. So, all right, here we go. A Weston man asks, I feel like bards could be the ultimate magical experts and explorers, but they feel limited by the musical requirement. A quick fix could be that instead of only musical instruments being a spellcasting focus, why not any tool you have proficiency in? I've had similar thoughts, and it kind of quickly goes like, well, isn't that kind of the artificer's shtick? I don't know. Excuse me. I think there's something there. There's something to play around with what it is that the bard is doing when they cast spells, right? Like, because prior editions had an answer for this. In first edition, you were taught priestly magic by druids after being a fighter and then a thief, and then getting access to a druidic college. You were taught a selection of priestly magic to supplement your other bardic abilities. And then in second edition, they have spells. Second edition, they have spells like a wizard. They have a spell book that they keep. And they can cast spells. They also advance way faster than a wizard. I remember bards, being really, having a lot more spell power to their name compared to the other adventuring wizards in the party. Then third edition, they're not quite casters. They're not full casters, certainly. Never played one in fourth. And then fifth edition, they're like, yeah, they're full casters. And I think like playing around with, like, if it's words and music, then why do they have any material or somatic components that they need? Like, are all of their magic simply, verbal? I could see it being like that. They literally are learning a different kind of magic or using a different kind of magic. They don't need all those other things that the rest of the casting classes have. That could be one way. But I also think, like, there's other sorts of implements they could have. I think, if this was the class that's like could use weapons as casting implements, just as an option, just baseline. Yeah, bards can, if they, they've picked up a knack for it. And I think it, if you tailor a spell list, so that it matches what you want bards to be able to do, then you can make them be more flexible casters if their magic isn't as powerful. So I think the way 5th edition currently does it is that, wizards are the ultimate spellcasters because their spell list is the biggest and it has some of the best spells on it. And like with Tasha's, they grabbed and gobbled up all of the ones that they were really thematically missing. Some really the powerful divinations. And like the fact that they have Wish, and that other classes, have to do other things to get access to that, I think is important. And you can tailor the bard spell list if you don't want it to be as powerful, if it's easier for them to cast their magic. So I think those are kind of my thoughts on it. But yeah, I like where your head's at. There's something we can do. The musical instrument requirement is, I think, a bit of a hindrance. And I think 5th edition kind of acknowledges that with its constant reference to words, oration, your speech. Because, having been, playing D&D since late 2nd edition, to me, the main hindrance to enjoying playing a bard was always, this looks dorky. Like, this Ridfest nerd is in the party of, like, hardened adventurers and, like, seekers of esoteric lore, and this guy's gonna bust out a lute and just start playing a tune? And, like, music and combat go together hand in hand, right? When marching bands begin as, like, accompanying marching soldiers, And so there's nothing wrong with, like, music and the sort of heroic action of D&D. It's the flavor of it, the sort of the troubadour, the wandering minstrel type with a lute or a harp. And I think like 5th edition is really broken away from that and presented a class that you can flavor it however you want. And then it has this weird thing where it's like, no, you have to use a musical instrument. You get 3 of them. You get 3 proficiencies. And you can also use it for a spellcasting focus if you want. And it's like, I don't know, maybe this last little bit of First Edition's legacy we can get rid of and have just a generic adventuring mage that has this weird name. I think that's all right. So yeah, let's see. Stefan asks, what do you make of bard colleges? Are they actual schools or universities, students attending alongside wizards or the like, or is it a looser collection of traditions passed along? For me, they are actual colleges, and in the priestly sense, is what they are. And I think this is where, like, if you're, these are understandings of words I learned as a historian, essentially, and reading things like, this is a college of priests. What is that? But it's an ancient sort of Greco-Roman kind of tradition. It's a group of priests, and it's a hierarchy of them that attend to one particular temple or god or goddess, and that is, I think, my framework for seeing them. Not modern colleges and universities, which to me is the purview of the wizard. The wizard studies. The wizard, delves into esoteric lore in tomes and lectures and through memorization and everything. That's why they're an intelligence-based class. I think bards could easily be caster or charisma or intelligence in that sense. But to me, bardic colleges are loose collections of like-minded individuals who all practice a particular tradition that's passed down through either oral tradition, long recitation poetry, or songs, and things like that. It's not written down. It's passed along through oral traditions, and that's what makes them a group. That's what makes them a coherent college, is they share that oral tradition, and they share it really just amongst themselves and for select others. And so maybe groups of bards are accompanied by druids or clerics, or they're like-minded individuals. You could see monks also being part of these organizations. Maybe they travel around and are itinerant, visiting communities and the like, serving the needs of that community for a season or two, or maybe just a few weeks, before moving on and going somewhere else. And so they might entertain them with songs and poetry and morality plays. There's all kinds of inspirations you could draw on here. Maybe they serve as judges or lawgivers, or they commemorate certain sacred occasions, or some place that's a time that's honored by the community. It's like the bards show up here and they recite this poem about this event that happened to our ancestors at this time of year. And that, that's the background that I'm thinking of when I think of them. I don't think of it like they're at the Magic University, and this is the Bard College, which is next to the Wizard College, and the sorcerers are on their own. I think of it more like a loose group of like-minded individuals that share a tradition and knowledge amongst themselves. And so that's where my head's with it. To me, it's much richer, if less relatable. And so I think like there's value in thinking of it from an academic sense of like, yeah, you actually go to school. I think there's training involved in these loose organizations. They probably have a place, a location, secret, no one else knows about. So this is D&D, right? So it's hidden by all kinds of magic. Maybe it's in a planar nexus or confluence. The College of Glamour meets in the Feywild, that kind of thing. And they gather there at certain times of the year or whatever, and go through training and the like. But it's not like at a desk with a book open kind of thing. It's different. And so that's what I like about it, because to me it just feels more organic and mystical, and doesn't step so much on the wizards' toes. And also, the wizards don't need to be on the universities either. They can be, at a desk in some reclusive wizard archmage's tower somewhere, having gotten in through letters of recommendation and the good word of someone putting their neck out for them, and it's just them and their impatient master by themselves. It's a great setup for like fantasy horror, I think, or other kinds of fun adventures. So I'm going to go through and check out some of the class features here, because I think there's this weird thing going on, just like, all right, what kind of magic am I doing here? I really kind of wish that they've just come out and say that this is really for you to flavor any way you want. That's certainly the subtext here, but I don't know. Bards here, we're finally getting the full casters, right? That off the bat, they are mages. They're full casters. They get 9th level spells. They get quite a number of spells known. They have features that will get them access to other schools of magic or other classes, spell list rather, that really makes them a very versatile class. To me, just looking at the Bard as a whole, extreme versatility, a class that rewards a variety of play styles, and with a suite of subclasses that are strong, thematic, change how you play the Bard or enhance core features of the Bard that in really interesting ways and really effective ways. And so to me, I think the Bard is like one of my favorite classes I've never had a chance to play. I make a lot of NPC bards for my 5e games. So yeah, spellcasting is great. There's a lot in the spellcasting description that I find just interesting from a shower thoughts on D&D kind of perspective of like, all right, I know the spells that I can cast, and I just sort of cast them. My magic comes from the heart and soul that I pour into the performance of music and oration. So already, if I'm reading this from top to bottom, Like there's a lot of mention of performance and, you know, musical, the like. No mechanical reason to take performance as a bard. It doesn't really come up mechanically at all. It's all sort of in the flavor of it. And so, yeah, I think this is really one of their core features. Like this, bardic inspiration and their skills and expertise, to me, define the bard. If you ever want to have an interesting time, go and read the spell casting ability descriptions for every charisma caster. And you see the many different ways that charisma is justified and as a power source for your spells, and the poor warlocks who have no narrative justification at all. It's just charisma is your casting stat. You don't even get anything about its heart and soul or devotion to a cause or you know, the primal essence of your being. It's just nope, charisma. Thin gruel, narrative gruel for us warlocks. Anyway, this is about bards, Jim. Stay on task. I skipped over all the proficiency stuff, which I realized was a big mistake, because to me, this is where the bards, have another part of their core feature, which is their versatility in the parts of D&D that are usually mechanically simple, right? Ability checks, skill proficiencies, pretty much everything outside of combat. And I find myself, when I do play bards, and I've played them in the past, that I really like this part of the game. I like being really good at skills and really good at the non-combat parts of D&D, because it's usually, I don't know, easier to get things done there. Easier to affect change. We are talking to an NPC and using, magic to influence them and the like, relying on your skills. The fact that you get 3 skills, just whatever you want, 3 skills, really makes this very versatile class, and expertise will back it up later. The fact that you have 3 musical instruments of your choice, I wish this was just 3 tools or musical instruments. You play a little bit with the with being like an artificer light, with your alchemist's kit and your herbalism kit, your poisoner's kit, or things like that. So I wish it wasn't limited to just musical instruments. But yeah, the skill proficiencies, spell casting, and bardic inspiration, 3 core features of the bard, and the most satisfying to use, right? When I see players of the bard, where they enjoy it the most, where they seem to get the most fun of it, is in these 3 features here. The rest of it seems to be kind of gravy. So for bardic inspiration, there's a whole bunch of wording on how this is supposed to be used, whatever. Who plays this way? Who plays in a way where they're like, the player rolled the die, and they don't know yet whether they succeeded or failed, because the DM's like waiting or something. To me, it's like you either roll and you might not know the DC, but the instant you're like, oh, I got a 17, and the DM's like, oh, yeah, that's a pass or fail. They don't go, well, would you like to use bardic inspiration? It just seems like a weird process of play that isn't organic to the table. Most of the time, bardic inspiration's like, oh, I really failed this roll. Oh, wait, I gave you bardic inspiration. You were supposed to use that beforehand. Oh, can I use it anyway? Yeah, that's fine. That's how it plays out, and that's fine. That is how it should be. It doesn't need to be codified, I think. I think it's just you get to add this die roll, and this is the cleanest and most, useful expression of this I think I've seen from the bard. There's other things you could do, like I remember 3.5, you'd always have to be playing music while this was going on. It was very cumbersome and really silly. It was like be playing while you're trying to sneak or pick a lock or something like that. But I do think that with ease of use of bardic inspiration comes a chance that we forget, like, what's going on here when you're inspired. Like, this only lasts 10 minutes. Even though it's a bonus action, I don't think we should think of it as like taking place in an instant. Like, something is happening. I think all of that narrative stuff earlier, where they're talking about bards and the music, the magic of their music and stuff, I think this is what they're talking about, bardic inspiration. And so I think this is worth spending a little time on, at least once or twice, to establish what it is that the bard is doing. What exactly is happening? What poem is it that you're singing? What song is that? what are you orating? What words, not like specifically what words, like don't give a speech unless, you're into that. But what's the gist of it? Give me an idea. I think that this is where, like, for players who like to have a little bit of spotlight time, like to show off a little bit, have fun, and also why perhaps bards have a reputation for players who like to show off and hog the spotlight. I have to be careful with bards. There's a reason I haven't played any this edition. There are several subclasses that I could really get in trouble with. But I don't want to be that player at the table with a College of Eloquence bard. I'll be honest. Jack of all trades, like there's a surprising number of things this bonus would apply to, not just initiative, but all kinds of like constitution checks that are implied in the ability score section of the PHB. There's a bunch of spells, like illusion spells, that rely on intelligence checks. I think Maze relies on an intelligence check. So it's not nothing. It's not just initiative, but at most you're getting a +3 out of this, and that's after 17th level. So yeah, it's I don't know, Jack of all trades. This is one of those things I could see just, I don't know that we need this, despite what the expert classes document has to say about it. I guess it's a nice bonus, but I would forget about this all the time if it were me. I just constantly would. But all right. I do like Song of Rest. I like that this is something that interacts with the rest rules. Normally, you're not doing much on a short rest. You can kind of keep a watch, read something, but you're supposed to be tending your wounds, resting, and so the fact that there are certain classes that have options that open up additional things that they can do during these periods of the game is interesting to me. Like the story behind this, the idea that, we're just going to take a breather, and the bard finds something, soothing music, encouraging words, something that gives everybody just a little bit extra. And the playtest document, I promised I wouldn't say anything, but I can't, it's what we know already. Just reducing that to some spells you always know that are healing. I don't know. I don't know. To me, this is a very flavorful ability, even if it's not the most powerful, even if it's not the most impactful. It establishes a certain narrative about what this character does in the world. And I'll be honest, I used to play old school Star Wars Galaxies and would love it when my character would just sit in a cantina and hang out while another player played music that would inspire my character before they'd go try to fight a Rancor or something, and I like that. I think it's cool. It's interesting. And I don't want it to just be reduced to spells, but I'm coming to accept that it probably will be. We get to Bardic College. I'll give you guys a rundown of them here in a second, but there's a lot of great ones. You can even have fun with Valor and Swords. They're a viable subclass, even if they're not the strongest. Yeah. Expertise. I don't know. Expertise does what it says on the tin, and it breaks bounded accuracy right over its knee. I think that's on purpose, and thus should be leaned into rather than resisted. And occasionally throw something out there that's like, you need expertise and enhanceability. You need all those things to get past this part of the adventure. Every now and then, just as a way of letting that character show off and try to see how high they can go. Font of Inspiration, I think, this is where Bardic Inspiration really takes off. Before that, you're only getting refreshed on a long rest, and when you get Charisma mod per long rest, which is satisfying amount. Now, when they're refreshing on a short or long rest, Bardic Inspiration is like candy, and this is a satisfying class feature. Like every time I have seen a player play a bard and get to this level with it, it's something that they never seem to get tired of, and don't seem to bothered by like having to remind the other players, oh yeah, you have this. It's like a core feature of their class. Get a lot of uses of it. It's impactful, satisfying to use. I really, really like this part of the class. And then right up next, Counter Charm, which is like, has anyone ever used this thing? There's a suggestion of something deeper and more impactful mechanically here that I don't think they ran with, and I'm not sure ever would. But it's essentially like riders to what happens when you play an instrument. And, you could see it maybe being tied to a performance check, maybe not. But it's just like, yeah, if you spend the time to do this, you just gain these benefits. I usually get chastised when I mention Adventures in Middle Earth because it's no longer in print or easily available. But it had a really cool expression of this with its version of the Bard and some of the other classes that it had, where it's like, when you spend 10 minutes doing XYZ, this thing happens. I think there could have been a version of 5th edition Bard where there's all kinds of things like magical abilities that happen when you just start playing music, and it's not spells, it's not it can't be counterspelled or necessarily even dispelled. Like, it's just magic of music that you get from this. But I'm not sure it would interact well with D&D's action economy and resource management. So I'm happy to let it live in a hypothetical timeline of somewhere else. And then we have a dearth of class features for the poor Bard. They get expertise at 10th level, they get magical secrets, but after this, it's scant. It's very front-loaded class. Their subclasses really only get 3 features, although they are also very front-loaded. So it's a class for like Tier 1 and Tier 2 play, I think. And I've not had a game where there's been a player that's had a Bard that got out of Tier 2. So I'm not sure how well it plays in Tier 3 or Tier 4, but I'm sure it's fine. They're full caster, so, they've always got that going for them. Good selection of spells with the ability to get access to some really good spells, any good spell they want, really, for those picks. So, yeah, I know for me, I would be like, okay, expertise, great. Expertise in 4 proficiencies is wonderful. Magical secrets, awesome. But, like, I don't know, for half the levels, like if I'm, not everybody goes to 20th, whatever, but fine. Half the fun of playing D&D is imagining that you get to play at a 20th level every time you play a character. I wouldn't want half of those levels where it's either like an upgrade to an existing feature or, just a slight bonus. So your die size for Bardic Inspiration goes up, or you get another magical secret, but you don't get anything new. There's no like new big ticket thing. It's just more of the same. And honestly, if I'm going to play that kind of D&D, I'd play like 1st edition, where it's like, I'm going to get everything before 3rd level. And then after that, it's just 3 times a day, 4 times a day, 8 times a day, whatever, and not really have to worry too much about it. But in a game, modern D&D, 5th edition, where, like having a little, something new at least every tier. Something that changes the way I play my character, opens up a new fast to play as a core feature. I think would be nice to strive for. But the subclasses do partially make up for that. Creation and eloquence are the 2 that I personally have banned myself from playing. I know that I would get in a lot of trouble with those. Any kind of class that's like, you can just make objects just whenever. Like, that's the shenanigans potential is way too high. I'm going to have all kinds of questions about the rules of that and what I can and can't do and what sort of physics are we working with here. I just don't want to put that on a DM necessarily. And then eloquence. To me, eloquence is like every feature of the eloquence subclass I want the base bard to have. It's just like across the board. It takes the core feature of your expertise in social interactions and your bardic inspiration, and just makes them better. And if you have a DM that's using those NPC interaction rules in the DMG, this bard will just, they're talking their way out of all kinds of situations. I would have calm emotions all the time, just like, oh, you're hostile? No, hold up. Give me a minute. Let me talk. And I like that idea. I think it's very fun gameplay. If you have a DM who's into it, and it can be very satisfying, but not everybody who plays D&D is down to talk to the monsters every time myself included. And so, I wouldn't want to just, completely bypass that, even if the rules might suggest that's a potential. So yeah, I don't know. Like glamour is very leans into the core bard, but to me is a bit crunchy for my taste. Swords seems like the battle master bard to valor's champion bard. Both of them seem to fill the second line Gish role fairly well to your preference. Valor certainly shows its age. It's clear that it's was written in 2013, 2014 kind of class compared to say Creation or Glamour. And College of Whispers, I played or ran a game that had a College of Whispers bard in it that went up to 10th level, and that is a strong subclass. I mean, you're a rogue, great in social situations, intrigue heavy, very fun class to see in action, high shenanigans potential. And I think when I think of the bard as a whole, assessing it, it's like high shenanigans potential. And D&D is a game that thrives on shenanigans. The crazy, outlandish, okay, guys, wait, let's try this. We're going to try this big, elaborate plan. Doesn't survive contact with the enemy. You got to pull a solution out of your ass. That is my favorite part of D&D, and I think it's where modern D&D really excels. And it can go a little bit too far in one direction of Rocket Tag, but maybe that's what you're into. But like that, by the seat of your pants, it's a disaster, but we managed to pull it out. Play style is incredibly fun, incredibly rewarding, and the bard thrives in that. They've got a big bag of tricks, very versatile. Frontline combat or the like might not be their bag, but they make great, say, knockoff arcane archers. They can back up some solid frontline fighters and not get completely smashed with, swords or valor bard. They're a great mage. They can back up a rogue. They're just a very versatile class that I think a little bit of tweaks ought to make them really shine. That's things like just making bardic inspiration easier to use and making it a more plentiful resource the higher level you go. It's really one of those things where I think 20th level barbarians never run out of rage. 20th level bards can never stop inspiring you. I think that's the reward for getting to those levels. The rest of it is things like tweaking the spell list to give them more exclusive spells. I really hope that the arcane spell, arcane divine primal spell lists that we're seeing in the play tests have a bit more development to them. I like that each class has a unique spell list in 5e. I think it's a powerful tool for making the classes feel different and making the magic that they do meaningfully different. And I really don't want to see that abandoned, even though it kind of looks like it's headed that way. So yeah, that's where I'm at with the bard. Let's see where y'all are at. I went a bit longer on my my rundown of the bard than I even thought I was going to, given it's a class I haven't played since 3.5. But I've run a lot of games for bards, and it's one of those classes, like I said, that my favorite one I have not had a chance to play, largely because I want the right DM for when I play my bard. But enough about me. I want to hear about what's on y'all's minds. So let's see where y'all are at here. Answer some more questions. All right. This is from Kodiak. How do you feel about leaning away from spellcasting for a bard and developing more meaningful class features, especially with their flavor text mentioning words of creation? I think there is a world where that's possible. I think what I was talking about with counter charm is how I would go. And to me, there is a design space in 5th edition where we could do more with ability checks. right? Right now, as they exist in 5e, they're very nebulous. How long does an ability check take? Is it always an action? Is it not? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. How exactly do passive checks work? Those kinds of things. Like, but there's still space of like, what if there's a class that's able to inject just magic into their interactions with the world through this more primal, I hate to use that word, but more like foundational magic that they have access to through these words of creation. And to me, it would, I think it'd be really hard to get right from a mechanical expression, but I'm not on the hook for that. So let's just imagine a way. It'd be subtle but meaningful, and that's hard to pull off in a game like D&D, which really rewards big effects, big impacts, things like that. I think subtle but meaningful is where Champion sits. And its reputation as being not the best subclass for fighters is, I think, because it doesn't have big, flashy, I do this thing and enemies drop kind of effects. And so I would want to avoid being too subtle, right? And I think having something where it's like, you need to play your instrument. You need to access these words of creation. But when you do, there are effects that you can produce. And they fundamentally change how your character either interacts with the base mechanics of the game or the like. They're an interaction or a mechanical expression of something that's different than a spell, right? A spell is this one discrete effect. But what if when you play this song, the rules of the game change for XYZ? So a Song of Rest under this, a more powerful version might be like, when you're resting, time seems to slip away, right? When you play this song, the hours melt, the passage of time seems to stand still, and you gain you and anyone who hears you, of your choice or whatever, gains the benefit of 8 hours of sleep, and during this 10, 15, however many long period where this magic's taking place. And like that's it. There's how many times can you benefit from that? I think that's a matter of fine tuning and the like. But that's the kind of thing I'm thinking of. Like, when you do X, you can choose to do Y, as opposed to like, I spend a spell slot to do a thing and then it's over. So yeah, that's kind of where my thoughts are for it. I don't think that'll ever happen. I think the spell slots, spells per day, kind of unifying magic use mechanic is here to stay in D&D. 4 out of 5 editions have it, and it's a useful framework. I personally find it pretty, just easy to explain to people. You can do this number of times, and then you're out. Even if it does have some weird, wonky kind of narrative underpinnings and doesn't match the fluff of what's going on. So yeah, I don't know. There was something like this was in Book of Exalted Deeds for 3.5 and Book of Vile Darkness as well. If you ever get your hands on those, they have a system for something like this, like vile speech and I think words of creation are the two. All right, let's see. Well, we got, let's see. Here we go. Harvey Specter asks, how do you justify a bard's source of magical power across different realms, especially if the world building isn't based upon a song of creation? So I like the second edition approach, which is bards learn spells the same way wizards do. They have a spell book. They have to find magic that they copy into it. They just, I think they have a more limited selection. They aren't able to ascribe as many spells into their book as a wizard, but to me, I kind of justify it as like, there's magic everywhere in Dungeons and Dragons, right? Just in the generic implied setting that the rules suggest, kind of thing. Like, it's trivially easy to gain access to magic. And so perhaps the bard's magical power sources, or their drawing upon different magical power sources, is an expression of a talent that they have for dabbling in different kinds of magic. Most spellcasters have to pick one way and stick with it. This is how they practice their magic, how they access this power. The bards just have a knack for picking it up from different places. They visited this shrine, said this blessing. Now this deity gave them this ability. They picked this other one up from a wizard they spent an afternoon with, at this tavern. And that they just have a talent for it. And in that sense, they're a bit like sorcerers. They just have a knack for magic. But whereas the sorcerer's knack for magic is a specific type of magic tied to some kind of supernatural ancestry or influence upon them, the bard's knack for it is just they're kind of good at magic, Like to go back to like the college university analogy, like they're that guy in class who's just like, this guy never seems to study. This person's like not here half the time. Are you failing? Is everything all right? This is a tough class. You're not at the study sessions, but they're here. They're seem to be passing. That would be the mold that I see that bard fitting in. So yeah, that's sort of what where I'm at with it. But I agree. Like right now, it's kind of hard. The answer, according to the 5th edition Player's Handbook, is because magic. And when you read all of the descriptions of how bards do their magic in the Player's Handbook, it's like you're literally just describing how any spellcaster does their magic. They say words that were, that have magic resonance and like, yep, mm-hmm. That is how magic works in D&D. It's not just vocalizations and vibrations in the air. The words have power. They're called magic. They're called the verbal components of spells. So it's both like, yeah, that's really cool, and also, yep, what do you think verbal components are? And so I wanted to have more impact, but to me, the bard is in similar places like the artificer, where the artificer has this suggestion of a completely different approach and relationship to magic that than other spellcasters have, but it's just a spellcaster with slots and everything else. You can present it however you like, but someone can counterspell you drinking a potion because that potion is a spell. It's just reskinned. And that is really where the rubber meets the road for me, because in those moments, that would just completely throw me out of the fiction, the imagined space. It's like, wait a minute. I'm not casting a spell. I'm doing something else. I'm playing a different kind of character, because if I wanted to just cast a spell, I'd been a wizard. And I think you could have a bard where it's like, no, they are doing different kind of magic. It's very, it's different. Maybe bards always get to have verbal components. You cannot silence a bard when they cast a spell. That kind of thing. That's the kind of impact I want. But yeah. Magnus Murdoch asks, can a class be strictly non-attack focused in 5e? Great question. Give them plenty of combat support and social buttons to push, but no attack actions or effects. Should a bard be able to make attacks? Well, of course. I mean, they've got arms, hands. They can hold a weapon. They can learn an attack cantrip or spell if they want. Whether they have a default spammable like vicious mockery or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I think the cat's out of the bag on that one. 5th edition is definitely every class will be competent in combat class, and my experience with playing a bard, it was in a version of the game where not every class is going to be competent in combat, and that's on purpose. That you build the party to work as a cohesive whole, and some classes will be more or less useful during this part of the game, and depending on what edition that is, that might be a significant chunk of gameplay where you're playing your instrument and giving out minor bonuses and the like, and that's not very satisfying. So, like, unless that goes fast, in which case it's, because you're not sitting there for hours. But I think in 5th edition has the philosophy of like, there's a lot of different viable class or party compositions. You don't have to have a cleric. You don't have to have a fighter, right? You don't have to have a wizard, right? There's a lot of different ways you can compose a party and have an adventuring group that can tackle the challenges and things like that. And that's by design, because Adventurers League and bringing in new players and accessibility, and I think it's a good thing. And so bards, to me, have a place in combat, even if it's not where they're going to shine. Even if their role in combat is, throwing up a heroism on the fighter, or an enlarge on the barbarian. Those enemies are invisible. I got a fairy fire for that. We're being targeted by archers, whatever. I got a fog cloud. To me, like the support caster for the group, even if you're not making attacks, you can still be impactful through crowd control and battlefield control and buffs, and being an extra source of healing, and every now and then throwing off an attack spell, or being having a weapon. Like, to me, this is one of those things where it's very much a player philosophy and a player mindset thing, where my wizards are rolling around with daggers and staves and things like they will fight you. If you get close enough, they will whip out a dagger and stab you. I've played editions and I really enjoy them where, like, the first 3 levels, everyone's chances to hit are the same. And what differentiates them is their armor class. And when you're ambushed by an enemy, you fight back. You only got 1 spell, but you can brain a goblin. You can smash a skeleton to bits. You could stab a dire rat, things like that. And I want to be doing a lot of different things, not just one thing when I play a character. I don't always want to be doing magic. I don't always want to be doing one spell of magic. Warlocks notwithstanding. I want to have a lot to do, and so I don't think that we ought to take anything away from the bard. But I'm not going to rely on them to be the heaviest hitters in a fight. They might have a clutch spell. They might have, they're a force multiplier. Make everybody else better, and then have something they can do themselves to change the situation. That's what I want out of the experience of playing a bard in a D&D fight. If I want to do a bunch of damage, I'll be a fighter or a paladin or something. If I want to roll fistfuls of damage, I'll play the rogue. Or an evoker, that kind of thing. Yeah. Let's see. Lots of questions about the source of bardic magic. I love where y'all's heads are at with it, because I'm right there with you. It's like, Jim, you can't go on stream and just gripe for an hour about how bards don't have a source for their magic. And I will, and I can. And I have y'all's support. Astra Catastrophe asks, if divine casters are faith magic, and wizards have roots in the Vancian magic that be feared by peasants, what do you think of bards being more folk magic, hearth home, any man's magic? I love that idea. I absolutely love that idea, Astra. I think that's a great place for them. It's an everyday kind of magic. There's a... I'm getting confused because I recorded the podcast right before this, so I don't know if I'm repeating myself from that or if I said it earlier in the stream. But like, I imagine there's a level of magic in D&D that is not worth expressing mechanically. And about the maximum effect of that I'd put is 1 effect of a prestidigitation. You get 1 of those, and that's a kind of magic that bards, soothsayers, hedge wizards, all those kinds of things, like the wise woman, all that's the kind of magic they practice. You're not going to be able to take on monsters with it, right? But magic saturates a D&D world, and to me, in my mind, when I'm creating a world and presenting it and the like, understanding that there is a type of magic and access to the supernatural and ability to influence it in a setting, in the D&D setting, that isn't worth expressing mechanically, but is worth expressing narratively. It's worth establishing in the fiction of it. And to me, the bard is all about that. Like, they're reading cards and foretelling, things about, the signs that the gods are sending them there. Or they're making little charms and luck potions and things like that. They just have knacks, right? They just have a knack. It sounds like the chainsaw outside might be starting up again soon, so I don't know. We'll see. Who knows what'll happen here in the afternoon. But I really love this idea, Astra. That's very cool. That their magic is the everyday folk magic. That one of the reasons why bards are so popular is that their magic is accessible. It comes in songs and poetry and the like, not weird arcane. What is the wizard talking about? What language are they speaking in? Why are they moving like that? Why do they smell that way? Who are they talking to at night in their tower when all the lights are flashing? The torchlight doesn't look like that. What's going on in there? No, the bard, they're fine. You just go down, like, first off, they're playing at the tavern every night. They're doing the poetry. They're reminding, the people of their past. They're connecting with them. They're facilitating social interaction. They're going between villages and settlements and, resolving disputes, dealing with the little minor monsters, little fairies that, you didn't leave the saucer of milk out for them. Like, all right, well, the druid's not around. You can go find the bard and they'll help you out. I don't know, there's a kind of, like, between 0 and first level D&D that I think you could really have fun in. Village D&D. Like savor first level, it's going to be 10,000 experience till we get out of first level. Let's have some fun solving the problems of rural folk in Dungeons and Dragons, helping those halflings get their pie ingredients and not get stolen by brownies and gremlins. Don't get caught up in the war between the mushroom people and the kobolds, that kind of thing. That would be really fun. That's a great question, Asher. Thank you for that one. Let's see. All right, hyper woke one. Here we go. Did you feel there was any major impactful bard changes with One D&D? I'm not familiar enough with bards to judge myself. Yeah, the spell casting, I would say, is the biggest one for me. Like I said, I haven't played a 5e bard, so I'm not sure how the changes to bardic inspiration and how it triggers and everything would work. I think making it a reaction is probably okay. At the moment, I'm getting it mixed up with the changes to guidance as well. So, but to me, the changes to the spell casting are the biggest, and it's had these weird ripple effects of changing spells like Shatter and Thunderwave from evocations to transmutations, which to me just leave my head scratching, because they're changing up how the bard has access to spells. The bard doesn't have their own spell list anymore. That makes me really sad. It really does. And instead has access to select schools from the arcane magic list. And that's a throwback to second edition, which I appreciate, but we've grown a lot in our conception of the bard and in the type of concepts that it encompasses. And I think, like, justifying it, or whatever, I really don't know if that is the justification, but like limiting it in this way, it really makes me sad. And it's not the only change to the spell casting. They have basically prepared spells like a cleric or a druid that they can just pick from their list and change it up whenever they like. I really like that bards have a limited set of spells that they just know. And if we're really wanting to expand their access and what they can and can't cast, then I'd like to see something else. But I see this is all part of One D&D's attempt to make the rules as they exist more approachable. And there seems to be some hints of like addressing perennial sage advice questions. I'm not sure how often the official design team gets asked, like, how do spell slots work? How do spells known work? How does magical secrets factor into that? But I think we're losing a lot of flavor and a lot of the implied narrative that, for me, is my favorite part of Dungeons & Dragons. I like that it doesn't say a lot of this out loud, that it just goes, well, take a look at this spell list and tell me what you think that implies about this class. Like, what are the implications of these 12 classes and their place in a setting? Because that's where there's a lot of fertile ground for, like, ooh, that's an interesting situation or way to see it. Like, could I make that into adventure? Is that a character I could use in my campaign? Like, could I play this character? And like, there's all of it. And when it gets like standardized and too mechanized and too much about like the mechanical expression of it, and then it loses a lot of that potential. And that's, to me, that's what I see with One D&D. It is the biggest impact because it's like bards in One D&D don't have access to a lot of the druid magic that they currently do because of the legacy of first edition, when you had to jump through a bunch of hoops and dual class 2 or 3 times to learn a bunch of druid spells. But you also had levels in fighter and thief and a pretty powerful class, and then, like, to me, I'm missing that. I don't want that to disappear. I like that bards have this weird eclectic spell list. I don't want them to just have access to wizard spells. Those are for arcane casters, please. And, if we're going to have classes kind of siloed into their class groupings, then maybe it's worth having a spell list for the expert class group that the bard can use. Because we're already having to construct a custom list for it anyway. They don't get access to the full arcane list. It's only a select number of schools, like illusion, enchantment, transmutation. I don't associate bards with transmutation magic personally. I think divination maybe. It just it has weird ripple effects and lots of changes that I'm not thrilled about. And I got to give them an earful, I guess, while the window's still open. Or I don't know, maybe it's closed by now. But yeah, that's what I think there. I don't know. We'll see. I'm hoping we see some developments in 1D&D, like sort of how things are changing and progressing along. I'll get to one more question and then we'll close it out because I started a bit late. I don't want to roll, but I feel like my throat could use a break here soon. Benny Boy asks, vicious mockery is super lame-o. Preach. So say my players. We find it less satisfying than weapon attacks and other cantrips. What would you suggest as a different default bard action? I mean, a weapon attack to me is fine. To me, bard makes great archer. But they also sort of like swashbuckler, swords, daggers, rapiers. To me, the difference between a short sword and a dagger, like D4 and D6, not worth writing home about in terms of the number variable. So any of those be good. Potential, it really depends on the kind of bard. I would really hate to waste a magical secrets on a cantrip. But that might be something I pick up with, a feat or something. And I pick up like Flame Bolt or Frostbite. I really like cantrips that have a rider. To me, what makes Vicious Mockery so great is its rider, is the fact that it's like, the next attack this creature makes is at disadvantage. The damage on it, just the weirdness. Like Vicious Mockery is just, I see it as like, can I do that on the ooze? It's just like, I don't even like. It's like, I don't want to put up this is not a hill I want to make a stand on, but it's also like, I guess, like, can we? Why? Maybe just wish there was another spell. And I don't. It's a fun one. It would be nice if there were other options for the bard, other attack cantrip options for those players looking to use magic every time it's their turn, and want something like that that isn't like making fun of a monster that and then dealing emotional pain to them. I am with your players on this one. I've never been a fan of it. I'm happy to let players cast it and flavor it however they like, because the game's about them getting to play their characters, not about my grumpy preferences. But it'd be nice if there were other options, and weapon attacks for bards aren't going to be the most impactful. So it'd be good if there was other combat cantrips they had access to, like really solid combat buff cantrips. It was like, this is a bonus action cantrip that gives a solid buff to an ally or something, and lets you do like a weapon attack or something else. But yeah, that's my wish. That's my hope. We'll see how 1D&D progresses for the bards. But the wonderful thing about Dungeons & Dragons is that once you have those books in your hot little hands, nothing can change them except yourself and a Sharpie and your own experiences of play. That's why I love this hobby. It's why I'll always keep coming back to it. And Dungeons & Dragons in particular is one of those games that I think encourages tinkering, exploring the different possibilities of play, and seeing that it is more than a game that is limited to killing monsters and taking their stuff, that there's all kinds of things you can do at the game, and that 5th edition is a solid framework to building on the kinds of systems and mechanical support for the game that you want. So if 1D&D is not scratching your itch, fear not. Just make sure you have hard copies of the game that you like, and then you build up your own. You create something for yourself and your group that satisfies the kind of play experience that y'all are looking for. So yeah, that's where I'm going to leave y'all off here as we close it out. But yeah, it's about time to give my voice a bit of a rest. I hope y'all have a great week and an even wonderful weekend. Happy gaming, and we will see y'all next week here on WebDM.